Hello, everyone. Randy Turpin here. Welcome again to Turpin Tree. I have some exciting things to share with you today, some new discoveries that we've made about the Turpin ancestry. I have discovered that my seventh great-grandfather, that's Solomon Turpin II, was instrumental in the Second Great Awakening here in America, and we're going to look at that today. That was an exciting discovery for me. But before we dive into that piece of it, I want to give some background as to what led up to this, some of the Turpin ancestry starting in England, then leading to the migration into America. Let's look at it. I've got it on my map here. Here in the northern part of England, you can see that we have this place called Tynemouth, if I can zoom in on it, right up here in this area, Tynemouth, and not far from Newcastle upon Tyne. In this general region, the Turpin family lived. Thomas Turpin, some people call him Sir Thomas Turpin. I'm not sure that he was really a knight, but at least he was gentry. He was a well-to-do landowner, and he had a son in 1600 born. His name was Lionel Turpin, born in 1600 in this Tynemouth area, okay? And he also married his wife in Tynemouth. Her name was Marjorie Hall, and they married May 21st, 1620 in Tynemouth. Now, to keep this in order, Thomas, Lionel's father, was my 11th great-grandfather. Lionel was my 10th great-grandfather. And so here we have Lionel marrying Marjorie. Well, something started happening in the history here that was quite tumultuous. A civil war broke out between the parliamentarians and the crown. And it was basically Parliament against the crown against Parliament. A war broke out, a civil war. And those who were landowners and part of the aristocracy, they kind of got caught in the middle of all of this, many of them not knowing which of those two sides they should pledge their allegiance to. Well, around 1643, Lionel and Marjorie decided to leave England supposedly to escape all of this turmoil, and they left for Virginia in colonial America. So Lionel and Marjorie, they leave England, and while they're at sea in 1643, my ninth great-grandfather was born at sea. His name was William Turpin. And they make their way. Let me first of all zoom out here. Here's the Tynemouth area of England. Well, then they come out from England. They probably took the northern route across the North Atlantic and ended up over here in colonial America, down in this region, the Chesapeake Bay area. So Lionel and his family come into the Chesapeake Bay, and they come up the James River, as you can see here, and they pass by Jamestown. Right here's Jamestown. They pass by Jamestown. They continue on upstream until they get up to Farrar's Island, which is right here, just south of present-day Richmond, Virginia, right here. So Lionel and his family settle right here, and there they start their life here in America. So they lived there on Farrar's Island, and in 1652, Marjorie died. In 1660, Lionel died. That left William Turpin as an orphan at the age of 18. Now, listen, today we might not think of age 18 of calling that person an orphan, but in that day, you weren't a legal adult until you were 21. So a person couldn't just launch out on their own at age 18. And really, there probably wasn't much left for an inheritance at this point, because Lionel's other sons had already taken charge of other parts of the estate. And so here was William Turpin at age 18. What was going to happen with him? we find that he fell into the hands of a man named Luke Gardner. Luke Gardner was a man who transported many people into Maryland. And he for a while actually lived in Virginia, in this Henrico County, James River area, because he had fled from Maryland during a time of war between the Protestants and Catholics in Maryland. And so Luke Gardner was living in the James River area, and evidently connections were made with the Turpin family during that time. And it appears that Gardner took charge or guardianship over the life of William Turpin, and in 1661 transported William into St. Mary's County. And I'll show you where that is. If you come back down the James River into the Chesapeake Bay area, then you go up into the Chesapeake Bay area right up here. There's an actual place called St. Mary. Where is it? St. Mary City, right here. St. Mary City. And William Turpin worked the plantation of Luke Gardner as an indentured servant, but it was more than an indentured servant. It appears that Luke Gardner was somewhat of a guardian over William's life and actually mentored him. At least that's what it appears to be. Eventually, like in 1664, we see William's signature signed as William Turpin, Turpine, signing documents together with Luke Gardner, who was that plantation owner who had transported him. Then in 1664, from 64 to 68, somewhere in that 4-year period, William moved to the eastern shore. This is called the western shore of the Chesapeake Bay area. You get over into the eastern shore of Maryland over here. All right? And so somewhere over in here, we believe up about right here, we find that William Turpin settled. Somerset, Manikin is the name that you sometimes see, Manikin, this area. But Manikin covered more than just this small area back in those days. It was a much larger area. So somewhere in this vicinity, William Turpin settled. And he married Margaret Ivory, who was only 13 years old at the time. That seems very strange to us. It might have been a little unusual back then, but it wasn't unheard of. He did marry a 13-year-old woman named Margaret Ivory there in Somerset County. They had children, and then on November 9th, 1673, Solomon Turpin I was born, and he was my 8th great-grandfather, born in Manikin in Somerset County, Maryland. Well, 1685 came and William Turpin died. Solomon was only 12 years old at the time. By 1692, Solomon married Elizabeth Beauchamp. And get this, Elizabeth Beauchamp was also 13 years old when Solomon married her. I guess it's just these Turpins, they like their women young, I guess. But then in 1700, their son, Solomon Turpin II, was born. And Solomon Turpin II is my 7th great-grandfather. 1720, Solomon II is the one that we have all the stories to tell about as it relates to the Great Awakening, all right? But in 1720, Solomon married Catherine Love. And no, she wasn't 13. She was 21. All right. Whew, okay. We're finally getting into a culture we're more familiar with, I suppose. And in 1724, their son, Solomon III, was born. And I'm not going to say a whole lot about him in this video because I want to focus mostly on Solomon II. But Solomon III was my sixth great-grandfather. And about 25 years after he was born, he married and moved into the Shenandoah Valley. All right? And that's where so many stories began that we're more familiar with related to the Turpin family history. All right. But right now, we're mainly focusing on the life of Solomon II. And this is where it starts getting interesting. In 1779, Freeborn Garrettson. He was one of the young ministers in the Methodist movement here in America. He actually preached in Solomon II's house, preached in his house. And about this time, this Solomon II, was about 79 years old. And his son, Solomon III, had already moved to the Shenandoah Valley, so he wasn't really so much a part of all of this, but it is interesting to see what's going on in Solomon II's house, in his household. These revival meetings are taking place with Freeborn Garrettson preaching there. And also Francis Asbury, who's regarded as one of the founders of American Methodism, the Methodist movement in America. Francis Asbury preached in Solomon Turpin's house and also in Joseph Turpin's house. Joseph was Solomon's brother. Okay. And actually, they say a society was formed, which to us is like forming a congregation, was actually formed right there in Solomon Turpin's home. Well, in January of 1780, Solomon died. Solomon II died. He was 80 years old at the time. And get this, Francis Asbury preached his funeral. Francis Asbury preached the funeral of my seventh great-grandfather. I never would have believed my family had those kind of ties to the Second Great Awakening. There were 300 people in attendance. The funeral lasted 3 hours. Now, this is recorded in Francis Asbury's journal. These events related to my ancestor, my seventh great-grandfather, Solomon II. And if you look at the journals of Freeborn Garrettson and Francis Asbury, you see these repeated connections with the Turpin family in these days when Francis Asbury, basically he was in hiding. The reason he was in hiding is because John Wesley was against the American Revolution, which was going on at that time. He was against it. He was loyal to the crown. And so Methodists were kind of suspect. People were suspicious. Are they going to be against the American cause? Are they going to be are they loyalists, in other words? And so I don't know exactly which side my ancestor Solomon was on during those years, but that's why Francis Asbury was having to be in hiding. But it's kind of an interesting thing. Some people have taken issue with me and said, no, Asbury didn't do anything in the Maryland, Delaware area during this period of history. Well, yes, he did. During that 1 year when he went down there, someone in hiding, he still was active, preaching places. And so isn't it something that his time of hiding actually put him into contact with my family? Now, my Solomon III, who is my sixth great-grandfather, he was in the Shenandoah River Valley at the time that this was taking place. And he was more involved with the Baptist movement over in the Shenandoah Valley. Well, there you have it. Our Turpin ancestors were actually connected with the Second Great Awakening. These were the early stirrings of it. When Asbury and Garrettson and people of the Methodist movement were preaching in revival, you should read the journals and the letters to see how so many people were coming to faith in Christ. It was a mighty move of God. in the very beginning stages of the Second Great Awakening. Okay, my friends, there you have it. God bless you. I hope you have enjoyed this episode of the Turpin Tree.